Oh, it's the Backstage Randy J at Coors Amphitheater. Let me get that straight. And we've been doing this for so many years, and many years when it was Fiddler's Green. Hard to have it to break. But we are backstage live. It's been a great night with Pure Prairie League and Peter Noon and the Four Tops. And headlining tonight, we're so thrilled to have John Kay and Steppenwolf. And also thrilled to have John joining us for a time back here backstage to talk about a lot of different things. And maybe some things that people didn't know about you, they just learned. And I thank you for sharing that. Often my job was saying, "Oh, we didn't bore you." No, it's fascinating stuff.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where sometimes you kind of get inside your head too much, and you say, "Wait a minute, you're here to play some music." You know, this other stuff is of limited interest, perhaps, and so. But in any case, since you asked me why we're touring for the last year, you know, I kind of got off on that track.
Yeah, sure, that's okay. I'm glad you did. I'm very glad you did. But as we go back to the music, you mentioned the music. Of course, you played the music tonight, so you have a right to talk about the other interests and causes in your life.
Well, because the music, you know, in spite of Magic Carpet Ride, Born to Be Wild, which, by the way, you know, I mean, in my travels as a private citizen, so to speak, in the far-flung corners of the world, I'm still astounded at how. I mean, I know Born to Be Wild's been in the space shuttle twice and all that, but in places like Burma, you know, after 10 days of going through the mountains and meeting Karen tribes and all of that, finally the conversation comes around to, what do you do? I said, well, I have a rock band. And so finally we get to the point that, well, no, never heard of Steppenwolf. What songs? Well, the one you might know is Born to Be Wild. And the guy says, oh, you know, every bar band in Yangon must know this song or they will not be hired. You know, I said, in Burma? I said, yeah, oh yeah. You know, so yeah, and last year in Botswana, the same thing, you know. So yeah, it's been a long time, and the music's gone to different parts of the world, and we've been very lucky that way because that's built an international following for us. So whether we're going back to Brazil in a couple of months, we were just in Norway. You know, we have a lot of members of the Wolfpack International.
Not a lot of bands can say they have literally two rock anthems that have a life of their own and become so huge and will never die, and you've got two.
Well, you know, sometimes people like ours, they have more luck than good sense.
You know? Yeah, well, tell us about some of the early days as things were getting together. And you came from Sparrow and you were getting ready to step up.
Yeah, it was one of those, I was thinking about that because exactly 40 years ago, this month, you know, I was sitting in a little Cracker Jack box apartment on Fountain Avenue in Hollywood. The Sparrow, a Canadian band I was a member of, had busted up. My girlfriend and I had just gotten married. As per written demand by the INS, you must marry this woman within 10 days of her arrival, or she won't get a visa. Okay, fine. We went down there and bought a bubblegum ring, the $5 license. You're now man and wife. Okay, let's move on. So now what? You know, what are we? We're not gainful. Or I'm not gainfully employed. She got a gig for a while there. You know, a lot of spaghetti and peanut butter. But the thing was, what next? What next? Well, as it turned out, you know, a couple of guys from the Sparrow were still living down the street, and the guy who moved in next door to where my wife and I was, Gabriel Nickler. He was a record producer. He said, oh, I hear you guys had a band. You got anything we can listen to? Play some old tapes.
Right.
Tell you what, put a band together and we'll do some demos. Well, so we got two of the ex-Sparrow members, two local guys from LA. And roughly July, early August, '67, we were practicing, rehearsing, and writing a couple of new tunes which led to the demos. And which then, when it came time to go to a label with Gabriel, we didn't have enough money. I mean, half of our equipment was in a hawk shop. We couldn't afford a lawyer. We didn't have a manager. So Gabrielle and I went in there and confronted the big record company man, you know. And what's this band called? I hadn't thought about that. And Gabrielle says, well, I just finished reading this book by Hermann Hesse called Steppenwolf. Oh, okay, that'll work fine, you know. So there were all these other silly names that were being bantered about. And we got the deal, and the only thing I insisted on was that we got enough money to get our equipment out of Hawk.
That's a good start.
And also that they absolutely in writing guaranteed us not only the recording of, but the release of an album, because we had been with another label as the Sparrow, and they kept saying, well, once you have a hit single, we'll let you go in and do an album. And at this point, you know, we had lived in San Francisco, LA, and bands were stretching out. They were doing 10-minute songs, etc. Only an album could hold them. Well, they were good as promised, and of course, by the summer '68, Born to Be Wild was going up the charts pretty nicely, and the album was already top 5 in the country thanks to the emergence of the new phenomenon known as underground radio and FM. And so off we went, and things became a blur for a few years.
Did they?
Yeah, because we were still sort of saddled with what the labels back then. They were still in a different time warp. Namely, we want 2 albums a year out of you. Well, wait a second. We're a band that writes its own material. You want us to go out on the road to promote the album when it comes out. You want us to do television shows. You want us to go to Europe. We're going to do all this in 12 months, 2 albums worth. It was just unrealistic. So we felt the pressure, and things got really crazy. A few years later, people like the Eagles said, "Oh, wait a second. You'll get the next album when we're ready."
When we're done.
No matter what it says on paper. Of course, now Boston would take that to an extreme and wait 8 years before albums. So, in any case, we were out there saying, "Well, deal's a deal. Our name's on the paper. We promised.
Sure.
So let's get back in there." So for a while, I didn't get to see my daughter much, and this and that. It got pretty crazy.